Hey everybody, John Reardon here for Nintendo World Report TV. I wanted to give you a quick look at Star Wars Outlaws running on Switch 2. Now we do not have a full review for this ready to go for launch. We didn't get code for the game until Tuesday night, like kind of late Tuesday night. Review embargo was actually Wednesday morning, so I think we had a whopping 12 hours to hit that embargo, and we knew we weren't gonna get that. So instead, we decided to spend some time with the game before launch and try to get a sense of what, for me, was the biggest question, is the actual technical performance of this game. Now, whether you liked Star Wars Outlaws or not when it came out on other platforms, it is an extremely technically ambitious game. Even on the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, it, alongside Ubisoft's Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, were pushing some crazy rendering tech that we really haven't seen so far this generation on consoles. And so seeing how this game would translate to the Switch 2 is a big question mark. And up until launch, my expectations have been pretty low. The first time we saw it, it was definitely not Switch 2 footage. It was definitely the game running on PC. And then the most recent time we saw it, we saw significant frame rate drops for pretty much the entire trailer. So going into this, I had pretty low expectations. But I have to admit, thus far, and granted, I'm only on sort of the first big open planet, I have been blown away by the performance and the technical makeup of this game on Switch 2, and I don't think it is ridiculous to say that this might be the most technically impressive Switch 2 game we have seen thus far. So let's kind of get into some quick overviews. I'm not going to give you a full tech breakdown or a full review here. This is just sort of our early impressions based on what we've played of the game so far. We'll come back and do a full traditional review a little later, once we've actually had time to see the entirety of the game and not just sort of the first open area. As for general performance, you're looking at a 30 frames per second cap, no surprise there. And from what we've played so far, the game has really no trouble hitting that. Now and then I saw an occasional 1 or 2 frame skip, but nothing substantial, and that's in both docked and handheld mode. Resolution, likewise, I think looks pretty good. In handheld, I'm actually very impressed by how sharp this looks. When docked, the resolution becomes a little bit more obvious once you have it on the big screen, but I still think it looks pretty good. I'm assuming we're using the Switch's integrated DLSS for upscaling here. I haven't taken too close a look to guarantee that, but I think that's pretty likely. It certainly has that look to it. And all of this while the game manages to look surprisingly similar to how it looks on other consoles. We do see a lowering of geometric detail in a lot of the environments, especially. The actual characters themselves look pretty comparable to how they looked on other platforms. Now granted, I don't think that the actual character rendering in Star Wars Outlaws was ever its strong suit, but these characters, as far as their detail goes, they look pretty good. The environments are where I think we can really see the cutbacks, and that comes in a lot of geometry pop-in, and some of that's pretty close to the camera, and then some of like the kind of secondary and tertiary details of the environment, little like details on walls and things like that, those really never hit that full high level of detail that you'd see on other platforms, and some of those, if you get close to like a random wall, you can start to see some of the flaws creeping through. I think this is most obvious in some interior environments where you do have a lot of geometric density, where it doesn't take far past where the player is, where you can start to see those low level of detail LODs just sitting right there, very obvious to see. I do feel like once you're sort of out in the open on a planet, and you're looking at more of these like rolling hills and things like that, then it's much harder to notice. You can still spot like some LOD pop in on rocks and things like that, and obviously foliage and all that, but overall it looks pretty good when you're out in the open. On the note of foliage, that was another thing that I was sort of worried about from some of the early footage that we had seen, but looking at the game in actual here in front of me, foliage is still remarkably dense. It's definitely pulled back from what it was on other systems, but you do still get, this full field of grass when you're out exploring the planet. That grass responds to your movement and the movement of other characters and looks really good. One of the things that this game does really well is wind, both in grass and in the trees. So when you get wind coming across the plains of these planets, it looks so convincing in the way that all the foliage just moves with that wind. And all of that has been preserved here, and it looks great. But by far the most surprising thing that I have seen in this game that I was not expecting is that I believe this is the first full proper Switch 2 game to have ray tracing. From what I have seen, Star Wars Outlaws has not one but two ray traced effects active on the Nintendo Switch, and they are active in both docked and handheld mode. They come in the form of ray traced reflections and what I believe is ray traced global illumination. I want to start with the reflections because I think they are by far the most impressive thing. Star Wars Outlaws was a game that on other platforms made constant use of ray traced reflections, and what these allow for, if you're not super familiar with them, is reflections of geometry that is not visible in screen space. So a lot of times what we're used to seeing on Switch 1, and even most Switch 2 games up to this point, are what's called screen space reflections, where the game is taking the geometry that's being rendered on screen and using that information to simulate what the reflection should be. Honestly, a lot of the times it works really well, and it gets you a pretty nice detailed reflection. The problem is it can only use what's visible, which means that if you say you have a reflective floor and you tilt the camera down, you're going to lose the reflections of the things that pass out of the field of the camera, or if something passes in front of those objects in the forefront of the frame, you won't have any reflection data. But with ray tracing, we're able to get accurate reflections for those things even when they are off screen. And it does this by essentially storing sort of a low-resolution version of the environment that it can test those reflections against. So in a game like Star Wars Outlaws, you're actually still getting screen space reflections, but as those things pass off screen, as you occlude those objects and you lose the screen space reflection, the ray trace reflection is used as a fallback. We can see that here really well when we go out into this open field. We have this large body of water and all these overhanging cliffs. We can see as we tilt the camera down that we lose some of the detail on those cliffs because that's the screen space reflection getting called out, and we can see the ray trace reflection underneath that. What's cool is that we don't just have the reflection disappearing as the camera moves. What's more impressive, because this isn't even always the case on much more powerful hardware, is that our character and a lot of these sort of secondary objects in the environment are also included in what's called the BVH, that sort of low-resolution version of the environment that those reflections are being tested against. So as we pan down, we can still see Kay, we can still see her speeder. This doesn't apply to most NPCs, it seems, though sometimes I've noticed it does, so I'm not sure exactly what the rules are, how the game is deciding what gets included in this reflection and what doesn't. But it looks fantastic, and it's great that it's included because it was such a strong part of the visual makeup of this game. And I'm really impressed that they managed to get it running on Switch 2. Now, the ray traced global illumination, which I believe is what this is, I'll be honest, I don't have as much experience with this particular effect, but I'm pretty sure. That's not quite as effective. I do think it still works well. With ray traced lighting, we're able to get accurate bounce lighting. So say a light goes and, hits a red carpet, and then there's a white wall next to that red carpet. The color of the red from that carpet is going to bounce up on the wall. It's going to take on some of that color, and you'll get this nice indirect lighting from light bouncing around off of different objects. It's how light works in the real world. Now that's present in Star Wars Outlaws on Switch 2, but it's at an extremely low resolution. And as a result, you get a lot of flicker as it tries to resolve. And at times it seems like it never really quite manages to, if there's kind of any movement to it. You get this constant flicker. It almost looks like raindrops or little sparklers going off on some surfaces, even if the camera's staying perfectly still. And that's sort of the one area where I feel like this effect isn't working great on Switch 2, is that it can get sort of distracting when you're standing perfectly still and a random wall is just sort of sparking in the corner for no apparent reason. I think that, those are more common than they should be, but most of the time I think the effect looks good, but it's definitely pushing up against the limits of, it seems like, what this system can do, especially when we're doing this and ray trace reflections at the same time, generally in the same scene. It's a lot for the Switch 2 to handle, but it is fascinating to finally see a game really try and push it. And once again, this is in both docked and handheld mode. There doesn't seem to be any change to how these effects work, or any noticeable change to their level of detail when you do undock your Switch and play in handheld mode. Now, as for the game itself, I thought it was pretty good when I played it on Xbox Series X, and I still think it's pretty good now. I've got some other members of the NWR staff helping with the proper review for this game, and we are working through it as fast as we can to try and get a review up to you ASAP. In the meantime, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you do have any questions about what we've seen of the game so far, feel free to leave a comment or to reach out on your social media platform of choice. You can also subscribe so you can see more videos like this. Give it a like if you just want to, engage with that button. And check out NintendoWorldReport.com for a whole lot more. You can chat with us about this or anything else Nintendo related in our Discord using the link in the description. Once again, my name's John Reardon. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.